Hi, everyone. I'm going to be talking to you today about the book Making Assessment Matter Using Test Results to Differentiate Reading Instruction by Nonie K. Lesaux and Sky H. Marietta. And so this book is basically gives you a brief overview of using response intervention assessment and how to then take the results of your assessments related to reading instruction to really plan out the best way to differentiate your instruction and what will make it the most meaningful for your struggling learners. So to start off, there's really two main reasons, according to the text, that they say that readers struggle with reading comprehension, and the first of those is what they call code-based skills, and those are things like letter identification, phonics, and fluency. And then the other half of it is meaning-related skills, which are things like vocabulary, comprehension strategies, and writing. And so the text talks about how important it is to differentiate between those two types of skills, especially when looking at assessments that you might be using in your school. You really want to look and see, okay, is these assessments, are they looking at the code-based skills, or are they looking at the meaning-related skills, or do they assess both of those things? So one strategy that they suggest in the text is to really sit down with the assessments that you use and categorize them into those types of skills. The best way to make assessment really matter is to make sure that you're using the right tools. So the book talks about within an RTI model, there are tools that you can use that make up a comprehensive assessment battery together that serve important and distinct functions in the service of student improvement. So these four types of tools include diagnostic, screening, progress monitoring, and outcome. And diagnostic assessments help us to understand student performance in authentic context, particularly to inform immediate lesson planning and intervention. So a lot of these assessments might be informal, such as teacher observation, but they also might be formal. And so these are the assessments that are most closely aligned with instruction. Screening assessments provide clear indicators of whether students are at risk in specific domains of literacy. And I want to talk a little bit more about screening assessments because they have an external benchmark or norm that has been carefully validated through test development to demonstrate where students perform relative to peers across the nation. So screening assessments, there's basically two type of tests or assessments that are used, and the first are criteria reference tests. Those are benchmark scores that categorize students at risk or highly at risk, not at risk, things like that. Whereas a norm reference test provides level of risk by providing percentile scores that compare that student's performance to the performance of other students either at the same level, same grade, things like that. The third assessment type is progress monitoring assessments, and they're used to gauge student growth over time as compared to a trajectory that has been carefully validated through test development. And all progress monitoring measures are formal. And then the last one is outcome assessments, and these are your standardized tests, things like that, that provide information on the success of an overall program, or school based on a student achievement levels in broad areas. So these are the farthest removed from everyday instruction, and all of these outcome measures are also formal. So the text then kind of jumps ahead to after you've delivered your assessments. Most of those things are, again, things that could be provided by the school. So you have a student, you've given them the assessment, so kind of what's your next step? And while each student is unique and individual, there are some common patterns of reading performance that can emerge from assessment data. So kind of as a first step to understanding your at-risk reader, you want to kind of ask yourself the following three questions, and they are, does the child read words with efficiency, but display weakness in word knowledge and or effective comprehension of passages? The second question being, does the child show difficulty with decoding, but show strong word knowledge and comprehension skills? And the third question being, does the child show difficulty with code-based skills as well as meaning-related skills? If so, which skills specifically in each domain? And the answer to those questions is really going to help guide you going forward. Because if the answer is yes to the first question, that they are reading efficiency, aka they're exhibiting code-based skills, but have weaknesses in word knowledge, they might be struggling with meaning-related skills. The second one is sort of the opposite, where in that case, the student might really be struggling with code-based skills, but has strong meaning-related skills. And the third one would indicate that they're kind of struggling with both code-based and meaning-related skills. And so once you've answered those questions about your struggling reader to determine whether they are really struggling with code-based skills, meaning-based skills, or both, then the text says you kind of have to do some investigative work to really determine the areas of weakness and where the breakdown occurs. So the first investigative strategy they point to is what they call taking a look at progress monitoring measures. And in this situation, you are going to go back and look at the screening tools that you used, maybe a phonics testing booklet if it is a code-based error, and looking for patterns in the student's errors, and doing sort of an error analysis to figure out what the mistakes they're making are. Because if there are patterns in their errors, that's likely going to lead you to their area of weakness and what they might need specific intensive instruction in. While this might take a lot of additional work, it's really important that you look at the student's actual raw data to sort of identify these patterns. And the text kind of mentions that there are algorithms and computer programs that might be able to identify some of these things for you if you're using a technology-based assessment. But even that can't always account for everything that you might be able to pick up on if you were to actually look at the data itself. The second investigative strategy is using diagnostic assessments with your struggling readers. And this is really important because while the screening tools might help you identify patterns and stuff like that, it's going to be diagnostic assessments and informal assessments that the teacher does that's really going to show how the issues and the struggles and the errors manifest themselves in the real world, when they're doing their actual reading in the classroom and things like that. So it's really important that you use diagnostic assessments with your struggling readers as well. So what you're looking at now is a tool that they've used in the book and provided for the reader to help develop a risk profile for a struggling student. And so pretty much this is a tool you can use for each student that you have that's struggling, and it's a way to organize and summarize kind of all of the patterns in their errors and the information from their test booklets, from their diagnostic assessments, and things like that, as well as a summary of their strengths and their difficulties, which is really going to guide you going forward in your teaching strategies. So just to sum up pretty much what we've talked about, really the key to making the assessments that you use matter is to really look at those assessments and see what they're assessing. Look at the results of your assessments and see what types of patterns in errors your students are making. Similar to, a doctor treating a patient, if he does not know what's wrong with the patient and he's just guessing, chances are he's not going to be able to fix the problem. Every once in a while you might get something right. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, as they say. But if you're not looking at the data to see what the errors are and where the weaknesses come up, then you're really not going to be able to effectively develop strategies for teaching that student. So the key in terms of developing a plan for yourself as a teacher to help your students become better readers is to really look and evaluate the assessments that you're using and the results of their performance on those assessments. So I hope this has been helpful. If there were more time, I would continue on to talk further about the next steps that you could take, but we'll save that for next time.